The scent of coffee and rain filled the little corner cafe, where an old record player whispered a love song from the past. The morning rush had ended, leaving behind a soft quietness, except for the sound of plates clinking and a girl's trembling hands trying to stack them without breaking another one. Her name was Lila Moore, a shy waitress with timid eyes that always looked at the floor more than people's faces. The regulars barely noticed her except to murmur a thank you as she refilled their cups. But that morning the universe had plans for Lila, plans that would soon unfold in ways that would silence an entire room, make a billionaire cry, and prove that kindness sometimes speaks the loudest when words fail. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of quiet souls to change the world, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Speaks. Your one click helps us share more stories that touch hearts and restore faith in humanity. Lila worked 6 days a week at Maple and Bean Cafe, a small but cozy place tucked between glass towers in the city. She wasn't like the other waitresses who joked and flirted with customers. Lila kept to herself, moving silently between tables like a ghost in an apron. Her eyes were warm but always shadowed, and her lips rarely curved into a smile. Life hadn't been gentle with her. She grew up in foster care, shuffled between homes that saw her as a responsibility rather than a child. By the time she turned 18, she had learned that silence was safer than asking for help. But silence for Lila was never empty. It was her way of observing, of feeling the things others overlooked, the sadness behind a stranger's smile, the exhaustion in a mother's eyes, the loneliness in an old man's hands trembling over a cup of coffee. She listened without words. That was her quiet gift. One rainy Tuesday morning, a silver car pulled up in front of the cafe. From it stepped a woman in her 60s with snow-white hair tied neatly into a bun and soft gray eyes that scanned the cafe like she was searching for something. Her clothes were elegant but modest, cashmere and pearls that didn't scream wealth but whispered grace. When she entered, Lila greeted her with a nervous smile and led her to a corner table by the window. The woman didn't respond. Instead, she looked up at Lila, smiled gently, and began to move her hands in slow, graceful gestures, sign language. Lila froze for a second, heart pounding, then smiled back. And to everyone's surprise, she answered, her hands flowing through the air with confidence and warmth. The cafe fell silent. None of the regulars had ever seen Lila speak like that, not with her voice but with her hands. For once she wasn't shy. She was radiant, alive. The old woman's face softened, and she let out a breathy laugh of joy. The two of them continued signing as if they had known each other for years. When the woman left, she gave Lila a small card with embossed gold letters. Lila didn't think much of it until later that night when she wiped the counter and finally read the name, Margaret Dalton. It took her breath away. Everyone in the city knew the name. She was the mother of Ethan Dalton, the billionaire CEO of Dalton Innovations, a man known for his brilliance, charm, and icy distance from the world. Days passed, and Lila thought she'd never see Mrs. Dalton again. But the next week, the woman returned with someone beside her, Ethan Dalton himself. The cafe grew tense as whispers rippled across the room. The billionaire, in a charcoal suit and watch worth more than the entire cafe, walked in with his mother. His expression was polite but cold, the kind of man used to commanding rooms but never listening to them. When his mother signed something to him, Ethan sighed impatiently. He didn't understand sign language. Lila watched the flicker of sadness in Mrs. Dalton's eyes as she tried again, only for her son to look away awkwardly. Lila hesitated. Then, heart-trembling, she began to sign for her. She translated the woman's gentle words into speech, her voice soft but steady. Ethan looked at Lila for the first time, really looked, his blue eyes narrowing, not in irritation but in awe. That was how it began. Over the next few weeks, Mrs. Dalton started visiting the cafe regularly, and every time Ethan came with her. He seemed fascinated, not just by how Lila communicated with his mother, but by the kindness and patience that radiated from her every movement. Lila never spoke much about herself, but Ethan noticed the way she treated his mother, not as a billionaire's parent, but as a person. She laughed with her, listened to her stories, and treated her deafness not as a limitation, but as a beautiful language of its own. One afternoon, Mrs. Dalton invited Lila to the family's private estate to help teach her son basic sign language. Lila almost refused. She was too shy, too afraid of stepping into a world where she didn't belong. But when Mrs. Dalton squeezed her hand with silent encouragement, she agreed. The Dalton mansion was breathtaking, marble floors, chandeliers, and gardens that stretched beyond sight. Lila felt out of place, her simple dress clashing with the polished world around her. But when she saw Mrs. Dalton waiting with that warm, motherly smile, her nerves softened. The lessons began awkwardly. Ethan was frustrated, impatient, and embarrassed by how slow he was learning. Lila, however, never gave up on him. Her calm persistence disarmed his pride, and for the first time in years, Ethan felt someone was speaking to him, not to his name, his money, or his reputation, but to his heart. Gradually, Ethan began opening up. He confessed that after his father's death, he had thrown himself into work, neglecting his mother and drowning in the noise of success. He couldn't bear to face her deafness because it reminded him of how disconnected he had become. Lila listened, her eyes soft with understanding. She told him how silence had been both her prison and her refuge, and how kindness had once saved her when she thought no one saw her. Through her, Ethan learned not just signs, but empathy. He learned to listen with his eyes, to feel what wasn't said aloud. Lila's presence began to change him. The arrogant billionaire began volunteering for charities that helped people with disabilities. He took his mother to the park again, not with bodyguards, but with laughter. And every time he signed, even imperfectly, Mrs. Dalton's eyes filled with tears. But one evening, everything almost fell apart. Lila's past caught up with her when a tabloid journalist discovered she had once been arrested for a misunderstanding during her foster years, a false accusation that was later dropped. The story went viral. The internet tore her apart, calling her a fraud, a gold digger. Lila disappeared, too ashamed to face Ethan or his mother. Days turned into weeks. Mrs. Dalton grew ill from stress, and Ethan searched tirelessly, furious at himself for letting her slip away. One stormy night, he found her back at the old cafe, cleaning tables long after closing. She was crying quietly, signing to herself out of habit. Without a word, Ethan walked in and began signing with trembling hands. "You taught me that silence can be love. Don't leave us in silence now." Lila looked up, stunned. His signing was clumsy but heartfelt. He told her he didn't care about the headlines, that his mother missed her, that he missed her. When she finally smiled through tears, the rain outside began to lighten, and the neon cafe sign flickered like a small miracle. From that night on, Lila became more than a waitress. She became part of the Dalton family, helping lead a foundation that taught sign language to underprivileged children and adults with hearing loss. Ethan and his mother stood by her proudly, not just as benefactors, but as believers in her light. Months later, during a charity gala, Ethan took the stage and spoke publicly in both spoken words and sign language, honoring his mother and the woman who taught him how to truly listen. The crowd fell silent as he signed the words, "Kindness doesn't need a voice. It just needs a heart willing to see." Tears streamed down faces across the room. Mrs. Dalton smiled proudly from her seat, and Lila stood beside her, hands clasped, heart full. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Kindness Speaks. Your support helps spread more stories of compassion and hope across the world. And